So warm welcome. I'm Dr. Daniel Foor. It's Wednesday, April 6th, 2022, and this hour-long teaching, talk, experiential practice is titled Initiations, Ritual, and Human Development. And I will start by doing some teaching for maybe half an hour or so. We'll have some time with an experiential practice and then a little bit of Q&A, and we'll see where we're at that point. The guiding question that I want to put out at the start of our time here is basically how can we actually learn ritual fundamentals in ways that are psychologically grounded, in ways that are mindful of the human lifespan, in ways that are culturally diverse and inclusive, respectful of cultural difference. And with that, why does it even matter to focus on ritual? What's up with that? Why focus there? So we'll get into that today. And before we go there, I'd like to take just a moment to speak about the offerings with Ancestral Medicine that are coming up. And three things in particular. There's another free open talk in this vein in about 2 weeks on Tuesday the 19th, but I'll be inviting guest panelists from Islamic Sufism, Yoruba traditionalists, a Yoruba traditionalist, Oloye Aikulala, and then a practitioner of earth honoring ways from the England. And we'll talk about how do we have ritual practices that can sustain us over a lifetime. And the two courses that are open for ancestral medicine at this time are Practical Animism and Initiations, a Life of Ritual. The talk today will focus a bit more on the content of the second of those two, but they're both courses that I'm very excited about. I guide them, they're full-length courses, and they're also supported by at least 30 international ritualists who hold different calls and breakout groups, and we're committed to having a very experiential approach to learning that'll us for that. So, registration is open for just a bit longer on the animism course, but know that you'll get a follow-up message if you're here today, and that'll include all the details, including ways to engage with some discount. So we'll extend the early registration discount to everybody who's here today. Okay. So to engage with the guiding question for the teaching, let me say a thing first about who I am and where I'm speaking from. Some of you, I recognize you and you're like, yeah, I'm used to hearing Daniel talk, but I know a lot of you might be experimenting with being curious if I have anything useful to say in the first time. So let me situate myself. Ancestrally, I'm down lineage from early English and German settler colonialists to North America. So I was raised in the state of Ohio. I live now in Western North Carolina with my wife, our two young girls. That's traditional Cherokee lands here. So I'm, so far as I know, entirely of settler colonialist ancestry from Northern and Western Europe. I wasn't raised with any kind of anything about ritual. My parents were like a little bit Methodist, not really, because they thought they should be for me, but I wasn't into it, so we all stopped going. So it wasn't a thing. And yet, early in life as a teenager, I had a draw to understand about ritual and spirits and stuff like that. So I was just reading about stuff, and I got connected early on with teachers of shamanic practice and paganism, which was a real service because it helped me to acquire a framework for relating with the plants, the animals, deities, subtle energy, dreams, all that. Like the world opened up early, fortunately for me. It's very helpful. So I went on to study religion, history. I did a PhD in psychology. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a psychotherapist, even though I'm not actively practicing per se. And in the last 25 years or so, I've spent a lot of time associating with established traditions or teachers and lineages of practice and trying to get at the heart of things and make a study of how ritual and sacred and psychology and all that are functioning, right? And in the last 20 years or so, I've been guiding others in practices of ancestral healing. And that's become a bit of a specialization, but really the larger frame for that is animist values and ethics, which is to say earth honoring traditions, relational traditions, and how do we authentically reclaim the skills as well as the framework to live in those ways, in ways that are good for culture and grounded and effective for life. So that's what I'm up to. And if anything, I want to underscore on that. I wasn't raised with any of it. And like a lot of you here, you probably weren't either. If you were, awesome. And it's probably differently complicated. But the first thing is that culture is learned. And so we can choose to learn about a thing that we're interested in ways that are still authentic and respectful. What I mostly want to do in the first half hour here is to speak about some of the things I've noticed in this last, like, I'm 44, but the last 30, 25 years of trying to pay attention in an experiential way to what's going on with religion and psychology and all that. So the first thing, the first pattern is that ritual skills are really just life skills. It's often not talked about in that way, but it feels very true to me. And there's a kind of hyped difference between religion or spirituality and then secular everyday life. And ritual does not need to be religious per se. If you have that kind of split, it doesn't require a certain identity, doesn't require even a certain belief structure necessarily. And ritual skills include things like how to handle your bad self when you're really spun out. Like meditation is actually really good for that. And things like meditation that a lot of established traditions encourage in some way. Contemplative practice tends to increase one's ability to self-regulate, which is a really, really important life skill. Prayer, which is a part of a lot of spiritual systems around the world, is really great at directing energy and focusing intent and living a purposeful life where you're doing things for certain reasons. You're like, I'm going to do this today on purpose. And you bring your whole self in alignment with that. Living a purposeful life is like a great life skill, whether or not you have any interest in the practice of prayer per se, right? How to open your heart more fully in your relationships, whether it's with your cat or your kids or your spouse or the people you serve in your work, whatever it is. A lot of spiritual practices around the world have a devotional element, which includes working out with God or the gods or the earth or whoever, this quality of open-heartedness and really being in presence as an intentional cultivation. I mean, we could go down the list here, how to grieve, how to navigate the fact that I'm going to die, you're going to die, the person you most love in the world is going to die, our kids are going to die. If you have kids, everybody's going to die. That's intense a bit. And so how do we embrace that and still lean into life? Well, religion and spirituality has got a lot to say about that. There are a lot of practices for how to hold grief and change in a way that you don't fragment psychically or psychologically. So ritual skills are life skills. They're life skills in how to navigate rites of passage, like getting born, dying, getting married if you're into that, having kids if you're into that, and like all the different changes that go down. Like if a tradition doesn't address those things, it's not a very complete system. Those are fundamental life needs. So rituals, like learning about ritual, is learning how to navigate life. A second takeaway is that a lot of ritual is really about relationship. They're relational skills, and not just how to handle your specific bad self, but how to handle yourself in relation to other people. Now, those people might not be human people. They might be plant people or deities or mountains or ancestor people, or there are all kinds of differently shaped people. We humans are just one kind of person. But ritual, a lot of ritual practices around the world, whether it's from your own ancestors or somebody else, whoever, are in this category of how to make contact and then commune with some other kind of person. So ritual to appease the river, spirits of the river, or ritual for ancestral connection, or a ritual with the elements, or a ritual with this or that power. It's not a ritual that's done in isolation. The actual skills of the ritual encourage successfully making contact and facilitating communication, whether or not it's with words, with another kind of person that's not necessarily human. Those are fundamental relational skills. Take something like offering practice. Whether or not you've done this personally, a lot of traditions make offerings, anything from like incense to a ram, or it could be a lot of things, right? But offerings. And if you've ever tried like a partnership, for example, you know that you're going to need to make some offerings. Now, like everybody's got their own love language, so to speak. Those offerings might not be long stem roses. They might be quality time. It might be an offering of setting down your phone to just focus on one another. It might be an offering of saying some really nice, thoughtful, reflective words. But the practice of feeding the relationship is an essential one that applies if you're relating with strange old gods or your kids. Same skills, really. And in that way, like a ritual skill, fundamental ritual skill, invocation, how to actually call the powers to be present. Who's really good at this? Babies. And like the crying of children, especially your own children. Oh, it's a lot on the nervous system. My goodness. And, but it's effective. It's like, hey, I have a need. I'm totally dependent. That's what I got. I don't even have words yet. Like crying. And it's not that different from elaborate, beautiful invocations by an elder traditionalist or ritualist. It's not that different fundamentally from flirting with someone you want to have a deeper connection with. It's a way of saying, I have a need. Notice me. Hey. And that can be, I have a need for healing in this community. Notice me, ancient ancestors whose bodies are the land. Or it can be like, I want more blueberries, daddy, whatever. It's like it's the same fundamental thing. And a lot of practices around channeling or mediumship or communing with the spirits, they have a lot in common with just flow states and creativity and states of pleasure and attunement with the world around us. So ritual skills are life skills, and ritual skills are also relationship skills in knowing how to attune to others, honor our own needs, be responsive to others' needs, and have good outcomes in our relationships of all sorts, right? So how can we learn ritual skills in a way that's psychologically grounded, culturally mindful, takes into consideration the lifespan? Another thing that I've noticed, and I had to notice it the hard way a bit, I think a lot of people do, is that psychological well-being and spiritual development are really not the same thing necessarily. You can make it a priority to develop through spiritual practices, different kinds of intuitive skills, like astral travel and like ritual skills. You can do otherworldly kind of things and be psychologically a mess, like a really fractured and harmful person. Some of my earlier teachers, I didn't have that distinction. And one of my first spiritual teacher crushes, I was all, happy to have like a traditional teacher. Oh my God, I'm learning stuff. I did learn things. I also learned in the hard way that that person wasn't ethical. Nonetheless, they could like change the weather around them. They had a sense of real interdimensional presence that I wasn't used to encountering growing up in like suburban Ohio. It just wasn't a common or celebrated set of qualities. And so I was charmed, and then shattered a bit when I learned that that person was also being very unethical and doing this and that and another thing. And I had to reorganize the categories in my world for that a bit. Like, oh, you can be really, really tapped in and also really unethical at the same time. Huh. Okay. Good to know that now. And it was one of the most grounding things I could have done as a ritualist to choose to train as a therapist. I'd already been in my own therapy before that, but if you know early on in life that like you have a calling to ritual per se, or group ceremony or religion, spirituality, like sign up for just at least 20 years of therapy if you can afford it. I know there's an accessibility issue, but like inner work in some way or another, you're going to need it for one. And it's just it's a really smart move as a ritualist, because the way, at least, and I don't know if it's always been this way necessarily, but the way that our access a lot of times in the current moment we're in to religious communities or spiritual practices happens, that doesn't necessarily come with a vessel to really cook and refine our not yet healed places psychologically. And so kind of need to weave that in intentionally in some other way, and not assume that the spiritual practices will take care of it. I also know a lot of people who are like really psychologically worked through, and they're like pretty integrated folks. And like those are the people that could really stand to have the ayahuasca or the like month Zen retreat or whatever it is. I mean, I'm not saying everybody should do ayahuasca, but the folks who are psychologically worked through, sometimes it's like, you got this. You have done a tremendous, courageous amount of inner work, and you're fine as you are. And if you want to take it to the next level, you know that your body is mostly empty, that your individuality is kind of an illusion, and that the whole world is made out of really strange old patterns of gods and love, and like your stable world is too stable. So there's an opportunity to actually have a cracking open, because you're psychologically well enough to roll with it. So ritual practices, which can really amp up intensity and make all kinds of things happen, are really excellent to be coupled with inner work and sustained psychological maturation work. And that includes taking inventory culturally of where we're at, looking at oppressive systems, having a commitment to anti-supremacist ethics, however that looks in the specifics of your culture and your life. So those two need combined. That feels important to affirm. Another way of saying it is good therapy is really great ritual. Is a ritual of like identifying and shoring up unaddressed wounding and needs in your psyche, which is really to say your body, your energy body, because your vessel will not be able to metabolize more intense ritual practice unless you do that. Or you'll do a bunch of intense ritual practice, and then you become a really ungrounded or hazardous person who thinks you're completely awake or thinks you have no accountability or whatever it is. There's plenty of those people. It's not actually that interesting as a look. There's a couple other key principles that I want to make sure come across. A fourth out of 6 is about time, and how time is really not very linear or not very straightforward in the realm of ritual or sacred, or call it what you will. And at the same time, we need an awareness of cycles and of different needs happening in different times in life. And from a human development lens, or from a study of stages of consciousness, like we don't all need the same thing. And partly that is about when. Like, I don't need the same thing I did when I was like 6 years ago before we had kids. My life's totally different having two young kids, like fundamentally different. And so I'm in a different phase of life. And that is really important to appreciate, because if we don't get that, we'll internalize this idea that there's one kind of right way to be. We're trying to figure out the right way to be. Well, that changes. It's a moving target. What we need now isn't going to be what we needed or what we need in, tomorrow or in 10 years. No problem. But unless we have a vocabulary to talk about the different stages of life, we're going to, it's not going to fit. The advice, the counsel, the practices aren't going to work well for us, because the practices that worked well 5 years ago aren't even going to be the same practices that are needed now. So there's no one size fits all, and there's no one approach that's going to fit without changing over all the years. So the traditions, the teachings need to adapt and take into account our different needs. But time is, so there is a progression in a sense, but there's no one way to do a life. And when we don't have our needs fulfilled, or we don't actually resolve the developmental challenges from an earlier stage of life, what happens is the need is still there. And so we might find that practices that really are great when you're a child, about knowing that you can be held and taking in nurturance and just feeling fundamental safety and security in the world. If we've never felt it, then those practices might be really alive and dynamic and important in our 90s. No problem. It's fine. Then that's the most interesting and alive practice right then. And so in that way, time is not so much linear, but it's about what story is most alive for you, and how can once you've identified it, how can you call in the practices that actually meet that specific need? So what rituals are going to actually serve you need to be responsive to where you're at in your life, but also what needs you still haven't tended to. No judgment about that. Life is harsh for a lot of people, but emotions will wait not just a lifetime, but lifetimes, generations to be felt. So often what we're sitting with is something we inherited. It's it's the ungrieved pain of my grandfathers. Great. What do I need to be able to access that? So time is weird. We need to appreciate cycles, but also that things aren't going to be linear. We need different things at different times. Not all traditions speak to that really well. Some get it really well, and others are here's what you ought to do pretty much for everybody all the time. I'm well, that's compelling in its simplicity, but it doesn't bring a lot of nuance. There's two other principles here, and then we'll kind of head into practice, be in dialogue a bit. There's no one normative life. There's no one correct, appropriate, right way to do life. That's obvious, I hope. But also what I found and what has drawn me to animist or earth honoring traditions, some of which are indigenous by how we use that word these days, but not all of them, is that those traditions, generally speaking, tend to navigate diversity of form better. They tend to have a better track record at appreciating sacred difference. And not only is there not one right way to have a life, you don't have to leave home at 18. You don't have to have kids. You don't have to get married. You don't have to, if you get married, you don't have to get married to just one person. You don't have to There's not one way to do a life. And not only that, but everybody's got their own destiny. There's no one correct duration for a life. And this matters to appreciate the difference and diversity of form. It's not just like cross-cultural, it's on a soul level. Like we are different beings in many levels, and we have different soul level needs. Like a person, we have two daughters. They have a lot in common, of course, but they have they're different people. And to raise them in a conscious spiritual way means to recognize, the actual practices that one of our girls might need could be totally different than what the other one needs. Even when they're at the same age, like all the other things can be the same, but on a fundamental level, they're different people. And so different rituals, different practices, it needs to match the actual situation. And the inability to proactively celebrate difference, it comes out of a kind of supremacist attitude that suggests that there's one right way to be. There's one like normative, better, appropriate way to be. And it can happen in subtle ways. I see it in my social media feed. There's a lot of things that kind of suggest this is the most clever and innovative way to be. No, this is actually even deeper and more clever. Now, this is cultural version 2.08, which just got more clever than the last version. And that's not necessarily bad, but and it happens a lot with parenting too. Let's do conscious parenting, parentheses, more conscious than those other ways of parenting. That's okay. And you might have two kids, and one kid needs some real structure, and that is love to them. And the other child, it just doesn't need the same things. It's like, why are you being inconsistent? I'm not. I'm meeting each of you based on what you need. I'm being consistent about my responsiveness to your difference. But, we tend to want to lock it in just one way. And that doesn't always do a service to meeting our specific needs. The last thing is that, I'm a fan of wisdom. I don't know if I'm wise, but it's on my to-do list. And it, I think, is an appropriate goal to cultivate wisdom and presence and loving compassion by whatever name. So how do you actually do that? Well, I know there's not just one way, but a principle that I think holds is that it's good to start from the assumption that we probably have plenty of raw experience with our own life to work with. So if we're talking about building a fire, we get plenty of firewood. It's your life as it's happened up to this moment. The interesting part is, what do you do with that? How do you light it? How do you make it come alive? How do you convert the raw material of your life exactly as it is into more presence and kindness and wisdom? That metabolizing of life, I think, is something that is well served by having different ritual practices that you can draw on. It's well served by just recognizing there is that process. That it's not like I got to go out and have these other experiences in order to be whole or to be cultivated. Less that and more, I have plenty of experience to work with. Have I really slowed down to digest and metabolize that into this other kind of thing, into the quality of wisdom and presence? We talk about in spiritual circles and all that, and in other more poetic ways that aren't religious per se, there's a lot of talk about initiation. It's in the title of the talk, it's in the title of the course I'm guiding. And, I've done initiations to different religious, spiritual things, and gone through the rituals and had the the stuff happened and shaved my head and done all this stuff. And that's cool. I mean, it's a lot of things. It's cool, sure, but it's demanding and it's expensive and beneficial and strange and a lot of things. But I don't know if it's needed one way or another. But what is more essential than a set religious style initiation, which has a place and it's kind of its own topic, is this process that happens for pretty much all of us of entering some heightened period of intensity or transformation. And usually it's more intense. Sometimes it's the slow burn kind of thing, where you're just not the same on the other side of it. You're still, in a way, who you were. Like you can access that, but there's another layer or there's another element that's present that wasn't when you went into the process. There's some fundamental change. And a lot of times that happens in a messy way because we don't have any kind of container for it. There's no structure, there's no support, there's no ability to name it while it's happening. And there's no ritual holding for it. And so part of what I feel that a literacy about ritual arts can bring into our lives, if you don't already have it, is the ability to convert the experience we already have into more presence through wondering, like, okay, this happened. What do I need to do here? Maybe I need to tell the story of it. Maybe I just need to be in presence. Maybe there's some kind of physical shedding that needs to happen. Maybe I actually do need to move to a different place. Maybe, there are 1,000 different things that could be called for. But until our experience is reflected back or converted or metabolized, it doesn't really come alive in the same way. This happens organically a lot of times. I'm not suggesting that it needs to be a formal kind of ritual, but traditions around the world, when we study especially rites of passage, initiatory process, and big changes, rituals that support transition, there's a lot of fundamentals that can be like extracted or learned from those traditions and applied in an everyday way. And so a lot of my own calling is to make the most fundamental practices accessible to people, so they're not being like oddly guarded by the gatekeepers of religion. And I think, I'll say another thing or two before we head into practice. But let me pause and take a breath here. There's a lot of salesy stuff these days, and I'm a teacher. I work with an organization I founded. We sell courses. I also need to eat, so I participate in it to a degree. But sometimes there can be a message of like, you don't have what you need. If you come have this other thing, then you'll be better, right? Like, what's the value add? Like, what am I selling? Or what's going to help me out? That kind of thing. And the disservice there is that we do have. It can cause us to undervalue our own life and the sacredness of our experience when we're comparing it to others' experiences. And it's not that we need to have more exotic, interesting, or intense experiences necessarily. But there needs, I think, I don't know if there needs, but ideally there are some ways that work for us. And there's not just one way to get at it, but any way that works to apply to our life this process of reflection and like turning the compost and metabolizing the experiences so that the soul level lessons and value that we're being invited into from our life can actually land. And we can stabilize it and live it and know how to share about that with others, know how to reflect it back for others, and like hold that for our younger selves. So that's where the emphasis is for me these days. That's the emphasis on the course that's coming up, and it's where I want to place emphasis in the practice here. And yeah, the practice would be on inviting support for life transitions, and we'll pause for just a moment and then head into the practice. So if you would take a moment, and we'll take just 10, 12 minutes maybe with it, but take a moment and find yourself in a settled space, and then we'll allow for a little question and reflection after the practice. The intent of this 10 to 12 minute practice, inviting support for life transitions, is to help you to be more resourced through your current moment, whether or not it seems like a big time of transition. And in the brief time, I'll invite you to reflect briefly on an earlier time of big transformation in your life, to notice where you're at now, be curious about your actual needs in the present, notice what support's available to you, and then to engage your intuition and guidance on how to access that even more. All you need is just a quiet space, if you can make that available to yourself, and I'll talk you through it. This is also a great practice you could come back to at any time that you're feeling under-resourced. Begin by just noticing your breath, noticing your body, and allowing your awareness to settle to your heart and belly and feet, and to be all the way present in your physical space and body. And while that's happening, see if you can call near to you at least one trusted power or guide or teacher in spirit that you work with, or just your connection to love and wisdom and kindness more generally. And ask with that one or those ones near to you that you trust, that your personal space be clear and cleansed and free from any interference or negativity, anything you don't need to be holding in your close personal space. Take a minute for that clearing. And finally, ask that your personal space be protected, and that you be in a safe and well held space, rooted in your body, resourced, clear, and protected. From this grounded place in your center, take a moment and identify one big transition in your past, something that doesn't have a lot of charge for you in the same way now. So notice what that is. And I want you to be curious How held were you through that time? It might be that it wasn't very much. Could be that you were very well held and it was just very intense. But bring your attention to what were the factors either that you needed and that were there, or that you wish you had and they weren't there. Notice the factor of being held and supported or not through that time. And from that place of acknowledging a previous time of intensity, bring your attention and your curiosity to where you're at in your life right now. Maybe it's not a time of big transition, maybe it is, but listen from a place of intuition and not just mind. And try to get a sense on what are the big dynamics in your life stage right now. Where are you at right now? And just noticing with curiosity what you sense about your life in the present. How well do you feel supported in the present? In the sense of having the key elements that you need to navigate the process you're in right now. You might feel really well resourced, and that's fantastic if you do. Just notice without any judgment, but real honesty. What's your sense of how held and carried along you are right now in your process in your life? Just acknowledging your impression of the level of support right now. I want you to notice directly, or at least try on the possibility that even if there isn't necessarily a lot of outer structural support that you might want, maybe you don't have a lot of money, maybe you don't have a lot of time, maybe you have an idea of a thing you want, maybe it's available, maybe it's not. See if you can notice that in spirit, and with the earth, with the ancestors, God directly, with the old powers who are love and kindness. On those levels, there's an inexhaustible amount of resource and support available to you. See if you can just notice that deep, deep reservoir that is also within you. And just in this moment, see if you can allow in a bit more of that than you're in the habit of doing. Just for the next minute or two, can you let yourself be held through exactly whatever is happening in your life by the ancient and inexhaustible source of support that is available to you? Staying with the sense of being nourished or held in the moment. Be curious from an intuitive place, not a problem solving mind. If there's one thing for right now in your life that's helpful for you to do or to not do, something to stop doing, that's an important way to be just a bit more supported and resourced in what you're going through. Any tangible thing that you can do or not do that supports your current moment in your life. Listen in on that for just a moment. Take the time you need here. And when you're ready, thank the supportive powers that you called to be present at the start. And start to shift your attention to ground in with your surroundings. And if helpful, make any notes about something that's important to remember or to put into practice. Okay. I'd like to open it up to see if there's anybody who has a thing from the heart that you want to share, ask about from what we've been exploring. And yeah, we'll let it be open. Yeah, Ethan. And if you would just say real succinctly where you're calling in from, that can be helpful.
Hey, Daniel, I'm calling in from Dallas, Texas. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. Go for it.
Awesome. Yeah, that was really deep and nourishing. So thank you for offering that space.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in my personal situation right now, what comes up for me is as I go through a transition where I'm going to be moving on to other things soon, there's almost a deep, bittersweet kind of sadness that I wasn't as present as I could have been for the chapter of my life that's now coming to a close. And there's a clinging to it with this unfulfilled wish that I wish I would have used it better. And I feel like there were things maybe left undone, or I suppose just the biggest thing is I wasn't as present as I could have been, and now I'm going to miss it because it's going to be left behind.
Yeah. Yeah. Respect. I believe you. And it takes a lot of courage to sit with regret. And when the conditions support it, to make repairs, or to go to people directly and be like, oh, I didn't show up as well as I could have. And in this moment, I want to appreciate what is possible, and things like that. And to be forgiving with ourselves as well. And uh, there's no, there's no quick move on that. Sometimes it's important to be like, oh, it's all right, and be good with yourself. And other times it's actually important to cook in the regret a bit, and to, not in the sense of being hard with ourselves, but to learn from it, and to not get paralyzed by that, but to increase our ability to sit with the discomfort. Yeah. And I find that a lot of those navigations are possible, but tougher to do in isolation. I mean, one of the best forms of ritual protection is to have really honest people around you who will be kind but direct, and be like Ethan, you're being too hard on yourself. Like, you did great. Or Ethan, like, I'm really glad you're like cooking in this. It's important. It's gonna be uncomfortable, but you're gonna feel better later, or whatever it is. To know where that balance is. It's so hard to be objective about that internally, but having good people around us so we can bring things to is can be really key. And so, yeah, thanks for your what you're sharing. And just that's what comes through, is to make sure that we're not navigating too much in isolation from others. Yeah. Kindness. Yeah. Wangui, and good to see you. Yeah.
Hi, Daniel. Let me see if I can switch on video. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah.
Okay. So I'm calling in from outside of Nairobi in East Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I think would like to share something, but also ask if you would speak to something. And
Sure.
it's about just noticing that in previous times of transition, as well as the current transition I'm going through at the moment, it feels like the level of being held and the kind of support that I have is, in a sense, kind of distributed. It's not in one consistent or a few consistent humans, especially. And I sit with a lot of grief around that, and a lot of desire as well. And I guess the grief comes from that desire. And I've described it also like a bit of a saltiness, that I feel like I have such tremendous support in the non-human world that is there, but not so much in the human world. And I'm desiring and having grief around like that consistent holding that can be human, that can be in the place that I'm in, as opposed to the one that's very distributed, that can kind of feel fragmented, because like no one person holds almost the whole story, or no one small group of people holds or can see or witness the whole story. Yeah, so and I was interested also in you speaking about like the consistency that a framework provides. So yeah, just wanted to share that, and just love to hear what you have to say about that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. I have that same challenge. I don't know. I understand what you're saying really well, at least in my own way. And I don't. Yeah, I think that the more this is let's say the longer we hang out with the spirits and their path, and trying to be a conscious person, and actually have moderate success with it, and kind of get a little bit cultivated or whatever, in some ways, the more challenging it is, I think, to find people who can really track us very closely. For one, people are busy and everybody's got their life and all that. So it's a very specific kind of gift to give to another person, to slow down and give them a very accurate reflection. If you can find it, if you find someone who gives good, like, mirroring for you, like, keep them in your life if you can. But I do that too. I'm often kind of piecing it together, where like this person sees me in this way, this person sees me in this way. I'm like, okay, I have this picture of myself, which is similar, but not the same as those things. I go to my ancestors and they're like, oh, we see you in this way. And I'm like, is everything okay? Like, yes. The larger field is like, it's fine. I'm like, okay, I'll stress out less. Just keep moving ahead, and know that you'll get feedback if you're out of step. So to some degree, the diffuse collective field, even though it doesn't have the acuteness of like, hey, I know you from before birth. I'm tracking you so closely. It doesn't have that same thing always. It still gets us there. So there's a little bit of that. Like it still can serve. I find that in some ways my own ancestors can provide the closest thing to that like long-term picture, even the multi-lifetime view. They're like, yeah, you want, Daniel, this picture of your life in a tidy way based on your this life, and you can have that, but let us give you the much longer view. I'm like, whoa, okay, now that's that stretches my self-perception, because I'm used to being Daniel, and they're like, well, you're also a soul who's having this journey this time, but it's a part of a bigger story. So yeah, we're always, I think, readjusting our self-perception based on the feedback of who's around us. And it means that it's really important to have good people around us, or we'll be led in a confused direction. So that feels true. I think that traditions are just made of people. Like I have an involvement in Yoruba traditions, and it waxes and wanes. It's like any relationship. I'm passionate about it, and then I'm focused on other stuff, and the shrines are there. I look at them, I feel guilty, and then I'm excited, and then I sit down, and they're like, why are you being codependent? Why are you feeling guilty about it? Come on, you're not going to break us. We're older than dirt. I'm like, okay. So then, but what can be beautiful about having relationships that endure over time, and this is speaking to the thing about a tradition, because traditions are really just relationships with certain sets of ancestors or practices or deities or whatever, is that they can hold they're like an external source of memory. Pets are like that too. If you have a dog you're with for 10 years and the dog dies, it's like someone that was holding this really unconditional love in your life for like 10 years is suddenly gone. So the deities they hold a sense of a piece of ourselves, like of memory and identity as well in that way. Traditions do that, I think, because they're not things, they're people. Yeah. But it's the only other thing I'd say is the longing to be known and to be understood, and to have someone be like, I see exactly what you're doing. Good job. And they can just like come in and like see, like, I see why you made that choice. I agree. Or I see why you made that choice and consider this, It's really healthy to long for that. So whether or not we get it, I think it's really important to not kind of push it away. It's if we push it away, we get into this I'm autonomous kind of confusion. And like, I don't need others. It's not a good look. It's not what feeds life. It's not accurate. Yeah. And that's what it's a big discussion of a question. It's a good one. I appreciate you bringing it. I have empathy for it, of course, because Yeah. I mean, even when I think about it, I've spent a lot of years in therapy and then sometimes not. And then I go back and I'm like, I want to be seen in a certain way. I mean, I want someone to be direct, but I want them to get me. And I'm like, who's that? Looking at people's websites, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Who am I going to trust with that job? That's a weird job. So, but nonetheless, we try. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I know we're close to time. Let me, I might stay for just a minute, but I want to, I see another question, but let me say a few things by way of wrapping up to honor the time for people that need to finish on time. This course, well, the two courses are open. The animism course is awesome. I'm going to talk it up in a different moment, but this, the Initiations of Life of Ritual course, it's the first time guiding a year-long course. And we have an awesome team of 30, 40 international ritualists. And it's going to be a journey through seasons of life, through different fundamental ritual skills and lessons and all that. And I'm excited about going really deep with it. I didn't plan to do this year. And sometimes I'm really methodical, and every once in a while there's like actual inspired vision that comes along. And this feels like it's in that category. So that to me means it's going to be alive and we're going to have a good time with it. So the registration's open for that. If you want to join, you need some flexibility. We, as always, have an ethic of accessibility around scholarships and payment plans and things like that. So let us know what you need. But it's going to be a blend of psychology and religion, spirituality, anti-supremacist critical reading of history and culture, and then pragmatic ritual, how to learn to do stuff ritually in a way that's like good for your life and not dogmatic. So if that has draw for you, check it out. We'll have a good time with it. And yeah, let me say just that. Appreciate you all taking the time today. I will stay for, so we can, I guess, yeah, let's go turn the recording off actually. And then I'll hang out for a few just because